Felicitous greetings, fellow fanatics. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Fanatic, and today we're taking a look at Star Wars Battlefront II, a squad-based tactical shooter by Pandemic Studios. First released in 2005, and not to be confused with the 2017 title of the same name, Star Wars Battlefront II was released to coincide with the final film of the Star Wars prequel trilogy, Revenge of the Sith. Its predecessor had released to much critical acclaim, and with high sales, a sequel seemed all but inevitable. The basic concept of the Battlefront games took the controls of a shooter and combined them with area control mechanics to give them real-time strategy elements. At the onset of a standard match, teams will spawn in with either half the map under their control or with a single command point. Players will then try to capture additional command points by having their soldiers in the vicinity of an enemy command point to turn it neutral, or near a neutral command point to turn it friendly. Once a command point is under a team's control, they can spawn units from it, as well as use it to change classes. If one team holds a majority of command posts, the opposing team will automatically lose reinforcements from their reserve. If you drain enemy reinforcements to zero, or manage to hold all command posts for 20 seconds, then you win the match. In Battlefront II, there are 4 playable factions. The Old Republic always fights against the Confederacy of Independent Systems for Clone Wars games, while the Alliance to Restore the Republic always fights against the Galactic Empire for Galactic Civil War matches. For ground combat, each faction has 4 units that are almost identical. First, you have a standard soldier who carries a basic rifle weapon, has a few grenades, and also carries a pistol as a sidearm. Next, you have a heavy weapons expert that utilizes a rocket launcher to deal heavy damage to enemy vehicles, landmines that will do what you expect and detonate when an enemy steps on them, a recon drone that can be used to scout ahead without risking injury, and again, a pistol for a sidearm. After that, we come to the sniper classes. Although most blaster weapons already allow you to zoom in with a scope, sniper rifles both give you 2 levels of zoom and have 0 recoil, allowing for extreme accuracy. Snipers also carry an auto turret which you can set up to give a location miner protection with or without remaining there, and again carry both a pistol and grenades. And last of the basic classes, but certainly not least, are the engineers. Their primary weapon is a shotgun which does as you'd expect and has low accuracy, but fires a spread of shots that are devastating at close range. But where they really shine are their utility with alternate tools. Firstly, engineers carry a fusion cutter that can be used to force enemies out of their vehicles or to disable enemy mines, and engineers never trigger enemy mines on their own. Secondly, they also come with a jetpack that they can use to lay a charge, then trigger it at a time of their choosing, dealing heavy damage to anything caught in the blast. And finally, they can also spawn a small number of health and ammo packs, which, for obvious reasons, is the only item in the game not restored by ammo packs. But in addition to the basic classes, each faction also has 2 unique classes. I'm not going to cover all of them, but as a couple examples, the Republic uses the Clone Commando, which can create a defensive aura for all nearby allies, and carries a powerful chain gun which has a slight delay before it begins firing, but once it gets going, it rapidly deals damage with pretty low spread. Meanwhile, the Imperials have the advantage of Phase Zero Dark Troopers, which have jetpacks that can send them surging forward with long jumps, and also carry an arc blaster that shoots out bursts of lightning that will jump from their primary target to other nearby enemies if it's fully charged. Each of these plays quite differently not only from the default classes, but also from one another. But that's not the only thing that makes each faction unique. In addition to soldiers, many maps also include controllable vehicles that you can pilot. This ranges from tiny speeder bikes all the way up to massive AT-ATs and a great many things in between. Some vehicles will even have more than one seat, allowing for soldiers to take control of secondary weapons while the pilot focuses on where they're going. And of course, you have what is possibly the biggest selling point of the sequel, hero units. These technically already existed in the first game, but players couldn't control them. It was still kind of cool seeing them on the battlefield, but let's face it, when people play a Star Wars game, they want to be able to play as some of their favorite characters from the films. If you fulfill certain requirements, by default being the player on your team with the highest score after a set amount of time, you'll be given the option to play as a hero. Each map has one hero assigned to it depending on the faction you're playing as. For example, play on Jabba's palace as the Alliance and you'll have access to Luke Skywalker. Meanwhile, if playing on the Tantive 4, the Imperials will field Darth Vader. Most of these try to be thematic to their respective scenes from the films, but sometimes they have to fudge things a little bit. I mean really, who are you going to choose for Polis Massa? Huh, Darth Maul apparently. There actually is a possibility this may be referencing the short comic Old Wounds, but that's a completely different rabbit trail. As for how the heroes themselves work, they're primarily intended as anti-infantry. Jedi and Sith of course use their lightsabers and various force powers, though if you're playing as perhaps Jango Fett or Princess Leia, you'll find that blasters are still your primary weapon. But you certainly shouldn't underestimate a hero unit just because they're not carrying a lightsaber.
Hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blaster at your side, kid.
When playing as a hero, your life bar is effectively replaced by a timer. It'll slowly tick down, and taking damage will accelerate this process. You can't heal by normal means, but every time you defeat an enemy, you'll gain a little bit of time. Although heroes are capable of capturing command points, they may find themselves better off leaving that to their teammates, as they'll only be losing valuable time while they're not fighting. Heroes can also enter vehicles, but kills with a vehicle will not restore their timer. Heroes are pretty sturdy, but they will eventually take too much damage or run out of time, at which point they'll flee and you'll be forced to select a normal class once more. Those are the basics of how ground combat works. If you're familiar with the first game, most of it is pretty much the same. The map pool has changed quite a bit. While there are some returning maps, most are new to the game, especially those that are relevant to Revenge of the Sith. For the most part, it's a solid improvement over its predecessor, although there are a few things that feel like steps backwards. Firstly, there's no longer starfighters in ground battles. The closest you'll get are the snow speeders on Hoth. Secondly, for some reason they decided to remove the ability to go prone. You can still crouch for a smaller profile, but you can no longer lay down while shooting, making yourself a bit more vulnerable to counterfire, especially from other snipers. And finally, no Bespin? Really? Did we absolutely need Polis Massa and Jabba's Palace over Cloud City? But perhaps the biggest change that Battlefront II brought to the series was space battles. These only gave players two classes to play as, pilots and marines, but unless you're boarding the enemy vessel, you're likely to be more worried about the starfighters anyways. Each faction has an interceptor which is swift and great at taking down enemy fighters, but is very fragile. You have bombers which can deal heavy damage to the enemy capital ship's critical systems and has decent armor. Next you have an all-purpose craft which doesn't excel at any task but does okay at just about everything. And finally, you have a landing craft which can be used to temporarily create a spawn point for your forces on the enemy ship, allowing you to attack them from the inside. Although it should also be noted that landing craft are also pretty solid as gunships if you load them up with gunners for their weapons and use it to take down enemy fighters. In space battles, you gain points by taking out enemy fighters as well as destroying critical points of the enemy capital ships, their engines, their bridge, their life support, etc. There's no hero units and the map selection is much more limited, but it's an alternative mode that adds quite a bit of spice to the game. On the subject of alternate game modes, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a few. The game has many to choose from for multiplayer, but the fan favorite is most likely Mos Eisley Assault Mode, where everybody plays as hero units, although you'll use a regular health bar instead of a timer in this mode. Yet my personal favorite would have to be Galactic Conquest, where you'll face off against the AI trying to conquer planets one by one and earning credits after each battle. Credits can be used to unlock new classes to bring into battle, or to purchase one-time buffs that you can use. Sadly, for some reason the PC version cut out multiplayer for Galactic Conquest, but for those of you that play on console, that is still an option for you. But of course, how can I talk about the game and not cover its primary mode, the campaign? The game's story focuses on the 501st Legion of Clone Troopers, starting from the last months of the Clone Wars, and eventually transitioning to when they're repurposed as Vader's fists during the Imperial era. There's really not much new here. There's some padding during the period between movies, but it has very little effect on the continuity at large. The most interesting thing is seeing some of these fights from the 501st perspective, but if you're looking for a game that expands on the story you're already familiar with, you'll want to look elsewhere. As for the missions themselves, each has unique objectives, and often you'll be able to play as hero units when relevant to the story. Perhaps the most intriguing missions are a couple where you get to break the normal conventions and fight against battle droids or clone troopers while playing as the Empire. Then finally, we have presentation. On the subject of character models and environments, the game holds up great even a decade and a half later. Sure, you don't have modern shaders and lighting effects, but all the same, there's a lot of detail put into everything, and it still looks great. Audio-wise, the game is excellent. Voice acting is mostly strong, although those that have the misfortune of voicing the heroes of course have to try and imitate the actors from the films, which is always going to be pretty hit and miss. In story mode, you have cutscenes that open and close each mission. They're made from the in-game graphics, yet they're pre-rendered and compressed rather than just running on the in-game engine, which makes them look atrocious on modern systems, far worse than the actual in-game graphics. Once again, the console versions have clips from the films that play at the appropriate times, But for some reason, once again, the PC has cut this content. I really have no idea why. And finally, of course, there's the music. It's Star Wars, it's the official John Williams track. If I play it here, I get banned. You already know whether or not you like it, so as much as I would love to have Duel of the Fates playing in the background right now, it's not that big of a deal. Shortly after its release, Battlefront II became the best-selling Star Wars game up to that point in time. Does it still hold up? The subseries did bring a lot of interesting ideas both in Star Wars and the shooter genre as a whole. I've never been a fan of what I call pure shooter games such as Doom or Halo. Even the ones that gave the genre a Star Wars paint job like Dark Forces or Republic Commando never really held my attention. But the strategic elements of Battlefront make these games a lot of fun for me. It is a pity that DICE really dropped the ball on the reboots, but the less said about that, the better. Although it's not perfect, this game does blend a lot of great ideas into a coherent whole that's sure to please many a Star Wars fan. In conclusion, I find Star Wars Battlefront II to be worthy of an enviable 9.0 out of 10. Battlefront II originally released for the PC, PlayStation 2, and Xbox, with a simplified version released for the PSP. The easiest way to obtain it these days is to purchase a digital copy through either GOG or Steam, although you can still get the console versions fairly cheaply on sites like eBay. If you're interested in purchasing or learning more, links are included in the description. But what about you? What do you think of Star Wars Battlefront 2? Which Star Wars games do you enjoy? If you have any questions, remarks, or opposing points of view, leave them in the comments down below. And please remember to like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. And if you really enjoy my work, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Until next time, farewell, fellow fanatics. Thank you again for watching. I have plenty more to share with you if you're interested. You can click up here above my head to subscribe to my channel. You can click over here on my monitor to see the most recent video that I've worked on. Or if you prefer, you can click up here to open this mysterious vault and see what video that the YouTube algorithm has picked just for you.